A special meeting of the City Council was held in City Council chambers on Thursday, August 22nd, 2024 at 7:46 p.m. for the purpose of taking action on the items listed below. Notice this meeting was revised and posted on August 20th, 2024 at 2:54 p.m. Absent is Councilor Varela. Councilor President Hapworth presided. Communications from the mayor.
We've been ordered that the sum of $267,325 is hereby appropriated from the General Stabilization Fund to the accounts listed below to fund fiscal year 25 pay increases associated with a memo of agreement reached with the Salem Police Superior Officers Association effective July 1st, 2023.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I move for suspension of the rules.
Councilor Merkel moves for suspension of the rules. Seeing no objection, Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I move for adoption.
Councilor Merkel moves for adoption. Under discussion.
Yes, just as it's stated, this is for the fiscal year 2025 pay increases for the Salem Police Superior Officers Association effective July 1st, 2023. My only discussion is thank you to everyone in our Salem Police Department and all our officers for their service.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. On the motion to adopt the sum of, sorry, am I missing something right now? What is everybody pointing at?
Have to recuse himself? I don't think.
Okay. On the order, the sum of $267,325 be appropriated to the General Stabilization Fund to the accounts listed below. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Further communications from the mayor.
We've been ordered that the sum of $190,001.35 is hereby appropriated from the General Stabilization Fund to the Human Resources Retro Wage Account for the fiscal year 24 retroactive wages for pay increases pursuant to the contract settlement reached with the Salem Police Superior Officers Associations effective July 1st, 2023.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I move for suspension of the rules.
Councilor Merkel moves for suspension of the rules. Seeing no objection, Councilor Merkel.
Thank you. I move for adoption.
Councilor Merkel moves for adoption. Under discussion.
No discussion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, on the order, the sum of $190,001.35 be hereby appropriated to the General Stabilization Fund to the Human Resources Retro Wages Account. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Further communications from the mayor.
We have been ordered that the sum of $52,938.18 is hereby appropriated from the General Stabilization Fund to the HR Retro Wages Account for the fiscal year 2025 retro wages for pay increases pursuant to the contract settlement reached with the Salem Police Superior Officers Association effective July 1st, 2023.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I move for suspension of the rules.
Councilor Merkel moves for suspension of the rules. Seeing no objection, Councilor Merkel.
Thank you. I move for adoption.
Councilor Merkel moves for adoption. Under discussion.
No discussion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, on the motion that the sum of $52,938.18 be appropriated from the General Stabilization Fund to the Human Resources Retro Wages Account. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Committee reports. Councilor Morcello.
Thank you, President. City of Salem and City Council, August 22nd, 2024. The Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, to whom was referred the matter of amending a zoning ordinance relative to B1 zoning, Section 3.1, Table of Principal and Accessory Use Regulations, has considered said matter and would recommend approval for first passage as amended.
On acceptance of the report, all those in favor? Any opposed? Report is accepted. On the recommendation, under discussion.
Thank you, President. First, to clarify, the one amendment was to include the word indoor for the commercial, whatever. Thank you. And that is exactly the way it was supposed to have been presented. And so we just added that word. And I want to also start out by saying that I apologize for kind of losing my cool during the discussion. There's a couple things that kind of set me off. And one is communication. And one of the reasons why I became a city councilor was to increase communication with my ward. It's lacking. I mean, I think we can all agree that communication about things that are happening in the city is lacking. The newspaper is not very good. People therefore don't get the newspaper anymore, which means that they have less income, which means that they produce less news. So it's a vicious cycle, and I don't know how to cure that, and it's not my job to cure that. I do work my hardest to get information out about what is happening in this council. I talk about the pros and cons. I talk about every zoning issue that comes before us. I present the way I'm feeling, and I ask people to communicate with me about these issues. For this particular issue, I got no concerns, and we do have a couple of B1s in Ward 3, and I understand that all B1s are different, and this is a limitation of zoning as it's defined. It is not a one-size-fits-all, but I understand that, and I accept it, and I try to bring myself up to speed on all of these issues and understand what the zoning currently has and what is being proposed. This zoning process is no different than any other zoning amendment process. We are, we have to follow the rules put forward by the state. The rules give us a time limit, and we have deadlines that we have to meet. The city clerk and the president of the council work very hard to understand where all of these things are going to happen in the calendar, given when joint public hearings happen, when things are returned from the planning board, but we are required to meet deadlines. This is no different, like I said, than any other zoning amendment that comes before us. In fact, when Councilor Gerselo was a little confused about why we were seemingly pushing things through, I referenced the kind of flowchart-like diagram that some of us received from the city clerk, and I asked the city clerk to send that out to everyone so that everyone understands the number of days between this deadline and that deadline, because that's what governs what happens in this body. That's what governs when we have to set meetings. We have to count back from the deadline to make sure we have 2 meetings that have 14 days in between the votes so that we are following the law. So that's how we got here. In addition, we've had meetings, we've had the joint public hearing, we've had emails from people in support and against it, we've had discussions through the letter from the planning board describing why they supported this. That's all well and good, but we as counselors also have to go in and understand the issues before us, right? I've always said, if you have any questions about anything in my ordinances committee, send me an email. I will get you the answers. All of us also have the ability to reach out to Beth Renard, to the planning department, to the mayor, to get answers to questions, which is how, by the way, I came up with the definitions for those items that were in this zoning amendment, because a constituent asked me, what exactly is a small family daycare? What's the definition? What's the definition of a grocery store? Never knew it, but the grocery store is in our own ordinances. All right, so I'm sorry to lose my cool on that, and I try very hard to kind of keep an even keel at these meetings, but I just don't know how to get everyone to be engaged, not only in our work, but for residents to be engaged with what we're doing here. We push information out. The mayor talks about this in his twice a month newsletters. It's on the public calendar with links to what's before us. I would encourage residents in Salem to also take a step forward. We are trying to push out information, but residents also need to take a step to be engaged, to keep engaged, to look at the calendar, to ask their ward councilors questions, to be involved in their neighborhood associations. So that's my soapbox. Onto this B1 amendment. I am supportive of these minor amendments to the B1 uses. The changes would allow restaurants that have liquor licenses with approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Licensing Board. Grocery stores with approval of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Small home daycare already allowed in residential areas. Indoor commercial recreation, like a yoga studio, like a whatever, with approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And home occupations, like an accountant or a lawyer, with approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the home occupations are already allowed through the ZBA approval in residential areas. Because these zones were created on top of an already built city a few decades ago, most of these B1 zones already contain these types of businesses. In fact, that's why they were created in the first place, to recognize the existing businesses within residential areas and create a zone that would allow some limited commercial use. Unfortunately, the designers of the zoning map excluded any new restaurants with liquor licenses or grocery stores or home daycare or small gym spaces. This exclusionary zoning makes no sense to me. We have existing examples of businesses that add to the vibrancy of the neighborhood, and we're at risk of losing that vibrancy. In Ward 3, Doobie's Restaurant and the Tin Whistle are examples of grandfathered uses, meaning that they were allowed to hold a liquor license and can be sold with a liquor license, but no other small restaurants can open in the B1 zones with a liquor license. Elsewhere in Salem, we have the Mercy Tavern, Witch's Brew, VFW, Salem's Retreat, Dottie and Ray's. Also, you may remember, as I mentioned, that many years ago, there was a Crosby's Market on Essex Street near the Collins Middle School, where the CVS and the auto parts store are found now. When my husband and I bought our home in 1989, the elderly woman we purchased it from stayed on as a tenant, which was really great at the time. She didn't own a car and was fiercely independent. And we think of New Englanders as independent and tough, but she was an immigrant from Prince Edward Island and a stronger woman you could not find anywhere. She could easily walk the 2+ blocks to the Crosby's every few days to pick up her groceries. She could walk to the dry cleaners, the small convenience stores, the library, and a bit further, about a half mile, to the downtown shops. When Crosby's closed, the neighborhood became reliant on cars to get to the supermarkets on Highland Avenue or the Crosby's on Canal Street. Losing this neighborhood shop had a really negative impact on the neighborhood. We hear over and over that residents want to be able to walk to local amenities. Being able to walk to a yoga or a martial arts studio would have a positive impact on neighborhoods. Being able to walk to neighborhood restaurants like Doobie's or the Tin Whistle has very much a positive aspect of living in the Castle Hill neighborhood. Unfortunately, the grocery store near my home is forever gone because its grandfathered use has expired, and that's a real shame. If there were a few more amenities allowed in B1 zones, maybe we could travel a bit less by car. It's ironic that so many complain about all the traffic in Salem while continuing to block and argue against allowing small amenities like these in our neighborhoods. Look what the loss of the grocery store on Essex Street has done to the community around it. It's forced more residents to get in their cars and travel up Highland Avenue, adding to the already congested road. Residents in all neighborhoods are looking for more options within walking distance, regardless of what the zoning allows. Neighbors living around First Street have been aching for a coffee shop or cafe nearby to get a sandwich and maybe a glass of wine. From Mayor Pangala's letter introducing the amendments in the B1 zone, quote, walkable commercial areas are a key part of cultivating a vibrant and livable community. We have identified these changes as ways to help make that more possible for Salem by creating the structures to allow for these amenities: childcare, small workplaces, and entrepreneurial spaces, dining, grocery shopping, and recreation to more easily flourish closer to where people live, end quote. And I completely agree. And I have to ask, what are you afraid of? Another fantastic restaurant like Doobie's? Another grocery store like Crosby's? Another Mercy Tavern? The people who are complaining are quick to voice their anger at another tourist shop popping up, but then block the ability to create local amenities for residents in their own neighborhoods. We need to rethink exclusionary practices which serve to block convenient access for residents. And like I said, zoning should not be used as an unfair tool to stifle competition. This is a very small change to the B1 zone, which could result in fewer car trips and a little more neighborhood community. Thank you.
Further discussion. Councilor Jerslow.
Thank you, President. I make a motion that we take Amendment A out of the ordinance.
I see a second. Seeing none. Any further discussion? Is that a second? Second. So Councilor Jerslow makes a motion to remove, you said Amendment A. Councilor Jerslow? Yes. Amendment A out of the ordinance, seconded by Councilor Prosnewski, under discussion.
Thank you. Well, everybody keeps talking about grocery stores and everybody wants grocery stores. And you saw here tonight how many constituents on Derby Street showed up just to speak. I didn't count how many emails I got that were opposed to the Derby Street with this ordinance, but you saw how many people actually came out tonight and spoke against it. So, and a lot of it's to do with more alcoholic beverages, the restaurants and bars in that neighborhood that they will have to deal with. And the burden is on the residents when there's loud people leaving at night, a lot of cars, people parking, blocking their driveways. Working on the police department for many years, I heard a lot of complaints. When the Pig's Eye was there, people were leaving drunk, loud, late at night. These are what the people have to deal with night after night, not just on weekends. I know the complaints. I've had to go to calls on that. I just think that if you want a grocery store, if you want these other things, these small home occupation, well, at least take the alcohol use out of it. Take the restaurants out of it that have alcohol in it. That's what a lot of the patrons, the residents down in Derby Street are afraid of. There's plenty of restaurants and bars down there. I named all of them. There's 12 of them in a 12-block area. I don't think they need any more. So I would make a motion to take that out. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Jerslow, if you're willing to say, for the clarity of all the colleagues here, does this ordinance have your support with that amendment moved?
Yes, if you took that out, I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilor Morcello.
Thank you, President. Just a further clarification. Do you want to remove the alcohol license and the recreation, the indoor commercial recreation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Is everybody clear on what we're voting on here? Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. Could you clarify, maybe for people listening to, how many votes it takes tonight to pass this?
So this is going to require 8 votes tonight to pass. So even though the fact we are missing one colleague here, it still requires 8 votes to pass. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I'm going to vote against removing this for this reason. This amendment to the ordinance is not just for one area, it's for all B1s. We are not doing a B1 by B1. And so I understand the goal is to pass part of this or some of this and get 8 votes, but I feel like this was a reasonable accommodation. This is not the old Derby Street where there were bars only. And I have places in my ward that I think the residents would like to have, you know, another Doobies or, you know, something like it, the Babe or whatever. You know, we used to have Bertinis. So I'm just expressing myself. I just think from a principled standpoint, this isn't about one neighborhood. And as far as public testimony, I said this during the OLA meeting, you know, and reinforcing what Councilor Stott brought up, people showing up in person, maybe some people are able to do it and others aren't. You know, we got a lot of emails from all different parts of Salem. I had emails from people in my ward, pro and con. But I do feel like that's part of the issue that we have as a elected body, is that some of the people who work when we have meetings or whatever can't show up, or go to school, can't show up when we have meetings. So I don't just judge people because they show up in person.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I also will not be voting in support of this amendment, specifically because of the question I posed at the end of the OLA meeting tonight. I pose again here. These are, with the exception of the in-home daycare, every other amendment here, including the service of alcoholic beverages in any commercial business and indoor recreation, all is only by the approval of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's guardrail number one. No one can by right open one of these establishments following this potential successful change tonight without going through the Zoning Board of Appeals process, which is a public body with public comment and a governing body that makes the final decision. Additionally, in the case of alcoholic beverages, those also have to be approved through the Salem Licensing Board, another public body that meets publicly and allows public engagement and comment. Guardrail number two. Third, we have an extremely robust and well-respected community impact unit and Salem Police Department that works very closely with business owners and residents to ensure the comfort and stability of residents in all of our neighborhoods, especially in the face of instances of poorly run businesses and bad behavior following restaurants' closing times. The licensing board can also control the time and place and manner of the establishments that they so choose to approve. So in my mind, we have an excellent support system for our residents that would control and appease the concerns that have been raised tonight. And I do not think, given the robust support, including multiple members from the Derby neighborhood, that the shadow boxing concern, without addressing the lack of confidence in our governing bodies that exist in Salem, should keep us from approving these small amendments that I think are good for not only our residents who live here, but our residents who want to open small businesses here too. Thank you.
Councilor Prosniewski.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to commend Councilor Nowak for trying to keep this alive and somehow, and doing, I mean, I'm sorry, Councilor Jerslow. I've known Cindy for a long time, so I think people will forgive me for that. She probably tried to take the most contentious aspect of this out of it and still make the rest of it work. And the most contentious part is the liquor in the liquor establishments. So again, my hat's off for trying to do that. And like I said before, I don't think that every B1 zone has the same needs as others. I think Derby Street is different than the Jefferson Avenue area, and I think the Jefferson Avenue area is different than the Bennett Square area, and this just paints everybody with the same brush, and not everybody has the same needs. So that was the reason that I was hoping that this would be somehow made to fit, one size fits all, and it doesn't appear to be that to me. So I won't be voting for this. Thank you.
Councilor Prosniewski, could you said you would not be voting for this amendment, just so the entire body's clear.
I'm sorry. I seconded her amendment to take out the the alcohol and because she tried to keep this going without the alcohol, and I would have supported it. But if it's turned down, I will not be supporting the change as it's going to be brought forward later.
Sure. Okay. Councilor Prosnowski, could you take the chair?
Councilor Hapworth, President Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I would also like to commend Councilor Gerslow for bringing that amendment forward. I don't agree with it. I do believe that the ordinance as written is the way that I personally would support it. But I think the sign of a good ordinance or of any good law is that not everybody gets everything that they want. I think compromise is important. I think it's something this body shouldn't forget, that we should be looking. I mean, we should have done this during the committee meeting for sure. This shouldn't be happening on the floor, but it is happening on the floor. And in my mind, though I don't agree with removing alcohol from the mix, we need 8 votes here and we don't have 8 votes. And I think we are better off allowing grocery and daycare than saying no to the entire package here. So appreciate the effort for compromise here and the open attitudes and open minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Stott. All right, Councilor Stott.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. I also appreciate the amendment to try to get this to a place that you feel comfortable. I do not agree with the amendment, though. You know, a similar story, North Street, Ward 6 area. I think that is what we want to see, and that would probably be the biggest lift for us. But again, zoning does not. I don't want to harp on Councilor Watson-Feld's comments, but it's almost like we don't understand the process. We are creating zoning for B1. We are not approving 20 more restaurants with alcohol in different locations. That's a step 2. We need to appreciate the work that is completed by our boards. It was much more eloquently said by Councilor Watson-Feld, but I am confident that if a restaurant with alcohol service wanted to open in a B1 in Ward 6, that robust conversations would occur at the Board of Appeals, and the residents and the neighbors would be heard, and all of the information would be taken into account. I am confident on that because we cannot have one size fits all for this zoning. So we need to be able to allow it to work for both the Derby Street neighborhood and for the North Street neighborhood. And in order to do that, we need to at least allow the ability in the first place. If you don't allow the ability in the first place and there's no avenue in, all we're doing is saying, this is a door, we might unlock it for you if you can pass step 2. But we are not just opening up the door, the sky is not falling, there are not going to be 75 restaurants with bars opened. So that is why I would not support this amendment. But again, I also appreciate it. I mean, that's how we get to compromise and the really sticking points of how we can make this work.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, President Hapworth. I also want to say I don't support removing item A out of here, but I appreciate the effort to try to get something done tonight. I just had a point of clarity, a question for clarity. Does making an amendment also need the supermajority of 8 votes?
No, just the final vote.
Just the final vote. So taking this item out only needs a simple majority.
Correct.
That's here.
And
Okay.
passing the final.
Okay, but the final one is just also for people listening.
As long as this is back to
confusing.
that, as long as we're not changing the 4 corners of what we're doing here.
Yes, so that was my other point of clarity. This is something we can remove without changing the 4 corners of the document because we did have a public hearing. And also it's the recreation component would come out as well. And that is the one for like a yoga studio or something. So that would be taking that out as well.
Correct. So the motion was to remove the entire section.
So I was wondering if we could just amend the amendment, even thinking if we took restaurant that serves alcohol out and left in recreation, so we could still have that option.
So the motion on the floor right now is to remove the entire section there. So unless that's amended by the motion maker, then which I don't think it is. Any further discussion? Everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay. On the motion to remove section A from, was it section J? One. Okay. Okay. It's a very fancy one. Remove section A. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? 1, 2, 3. So the motion passes 7-3. Back to the main motion, which is passing the ordinance change as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Madam City Clerk, is this a roll call? Please call the roll.
Counselor Cohen,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Harvey,
Yes.
Counselor Jerslow,
Yes.
Counselor Merkel,
Yes.
Counselor Marcillo,
Yes.
Counselor Prosnowski,
Yes.
Counselor Stott,
Yes.
Counselor Watson Felt,
Yes.
and Counselor Hapworth.
Yes. First passage of a zoning ordinance relative to B1, section 3.1, table of principal accessory uses as amended. We have 10 counselors voting, 1 absent, 10 in favor, none opposed. Matter carries. Unfinished business.
We have a second passage of an ordinance amending an ordinance relative to Chapter 42, Section 75A, Halloween resident sticker parking.
Councilor Morsillo.
Thank you, President. I move for adoption for second and final passage.
Councilor Morsillo moves for adoption for second and final passage. Any discussion?
This is just the October resident parking that we voted on last time with the long list of streets in here. And the process, again, for those that are listening, is that the streets that are eligible, the residents would sign up online to get their car registered for October only resident parking.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, on adoption for second passage, all those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. And for anyone wondering what Councilor Sargent dropped off up here, it is a smiley face. Further unfinished business.
We have a second passage of an ordinance amending an ordinance relative to Chapter 42, Section 75, resident sticker parking.
Councilor Morsillo.
Thank you, President. I move for adoption move for second passage, second and final passage.
Councilor Morsillo moves for adoption for second and final passage. Any discussion?
So this is the citywide resident-only parking, and just to remind people, we did amend this to increase the price to $10 per year for each permit, and we also increased the visitor parking. I'm looking it up. Section D. 15 for the first and 30 for the second. Thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, President Hapworth. So at the July 18th OLA meeting, we voted unanimously at the meeting not to raise the fees. And there was a lot of consideration. I have a decent amount of resident parking. I know it's only 18 or 19% of the city, but I do have a lot and have heard from a lot of residents how confusing it is. I know President Hapworth, you had expressed, an idea, a concept about having hybrid and things like that. And, there was no hearing between then and the special meeting on the 25th, which I wasn't able to attend. And I still think that we should not have raised the fees because we can always increase them. So I'm going to move that under Article D, fees, that we move it back to $5 for the permit, $10 for the first visitor, and $20 for the second visitor pass, and then reflect that for the seasonal passes from $10 to $5. And that's my motion.
Councillor Cohen, can you go backwards and just restate that motion there, where we're at in this?
My motion is that Article D fees, that we change the $10 for the resident parking permit to $5, the first visitor parking permit from 15 to 10, and the second visitor parking permit from 30 to 20, and then the fee for seasonal, which was added this year, from 10 back to 5.
Okay, so we have, trying to write as fast as I can here. Resident from 10 to 5.
I'm corrected by Councillor Stott. I will eliminate the seasonal portion because I misread that.
So we have resident from $10 to $5, visitor from $15 to $10, and second visitor from $30 to $20. Is that correct? Do we have a second on that? Councillor Prosnewski, seconded by Councillor Prosnewski. Under discussion. Any discussion?
I explained it in my preamble.
Further discussion? On Councillor Cohen's motion to adjust the fees, resident 10 to 5, visitor, first visitor 15 to 10, second visitor 30 to 20. All those in favor? 2, 4. Any opposed? 5. So we have,
Didn't get the favor.
sorry. Raise your hand if you're in favor. Again, apologize. 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor. Yep. And then opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, on the motion for second and final passage, all those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Councillor Prosnewski.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Councillor Prosnewski moves to adjourn. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.